What's up, YouTube? Before I get into the video, let me remind you, if you like my content, please hit that like and subscribe button. And also, if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen, capital U, capital R. I do all this in my free time, so any amount of support can help me bring more of this content to you more often. Okay, today our deck tech is going to be looking at Osgood Operation Double. I have no idea why I like this card. I think it is freaking hilarious. When I first saw the card, I literally had to build it. I don't know why. There was some calling to me that was like, you have to build this deck. So we're going to take a look at this real quick. So Osgood is 2 and 2 blue for a 2/2. When you cast the spell, create a token that is a copy of it, except it isn't legendary. You can tap it to add 1 colorless mana, but you can spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability on an artifact. It has Paradox. When you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you get to investigate. This is the clue token, or the Osgood Operation Double. Just so you are aware. So we're going to look at the creatures first. There are quite a lot less creatures than I normally use because this is more of a... It's just a very strange deck, we'll put it that way. Starting with Academy Manufactor for 3, it's a 1/3. If you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create one of each. All right, next up we have Arcane Proxy. This costs 7. It is a 4/3. It has a prototype of 1 and 2 blue, which would make it a 2/1 instead. And when Arcane Proxy enters the battlefield, if you cast it, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to Arcane Proxy's power from your graveyard. Copy that card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Then we got Clever Impersonator for 2 and 2 blue. This is 0/0. When you may have Clever Impersonator enter the battlefield as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield. We got Cyberdrive Awakener for 5 and a blue. It is a 4/4 with flying. Other artifact creatures you control have flying, and when Cyberdrive Awakener enters the battlefield until end of turn, each non-creature artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/4. Next up, we have Emery Lurker of the Loch. It is 2 and a blue for a 1/2. It has affinity for artifacts, and when Emery Lurker of the Loch enters the battlefield, mill 4 cards. You can tap her to choose target artifact and card in your graveyard, and you may cast that card this turn. We've got Ethereal Investigator for 3 and a blue. It is a 2/3 with flying. When Ethereal Investigator enters the battlefield, investigate X times, where X is the number of opponents you have. And whenever you draw your second card each turn, you get to create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. We got Glasspool Mimic. For 2 and a blue, it is a 0/0. You may have Glasspool Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature you control, except that it is a shapeshifter rogue, in addition to its other types. It also is a land on the other side. We got Grand Architect for 2 and 2 blue. It is a 1/3. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1, and you can pay a blue to have target artifact creature become blue until end of turn. You may also tap an untapped blue creature you control to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. We have Jacob Halkin, Inspector, 1 and a blue for a 0/2. You can tap Jacob to draw a card, then exile a card from your hand face down. You may look at the card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may pay 4 and 2 blue. If you do, transform Jacob Halkin, Inspector. You get Halkin's Insight. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at that card as long as it remains exiled. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land card or cast spells from among the cards in exile with this permanent without paying its mana cost. Ooh, can't do English today. All right, we have Ledger Shredder For 1 and a blue, it's a 1/3 with flying. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, Ledger Shredder connives. Magus of the Future, for 2 and 3 blue, it is a 2/3. You play with the top card of your library revealed, and you may play the top card of your library. Mirror Hall Mimic, for 3 and a blue, you may have Mirror Hall Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature you control. Creature on the battlefield, my bad, not you control. Except it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and it has Disturb for 3 and 2 blue. Its Disturb side is Ghastly Mimicry. It's an enchant creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types. If Ghastly Mimicry would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. We have Phyrexian Metamorph for 3 and a Phyrexian blue mana. It is a 0/0. You may have Phyrexian Metamorph enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or creature on the battlefield, except it is an artifact in addition to its other types. We got Star Whale for 6 and 2 blue. It is an 8/8 with flying and vigilance. Other creatures you control have Ward 2 and has Suspend for 6. You pay 1 and a blue to suspend it. Sir Ginger the Meal Ender for 2, it's a 3/1. Sir Ginger the Meal Ender has Trample, Hexproof, and Haste as long as an opponent controls a Planeswalker, and whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Sir Ginger and scry 1. You can pay 2 and tap and sacrifice Sir Ginger and gain life equal to its power. We have Reality Chip for 1 and a blue. It's a 0/4. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and as long as Reality Chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. It has Reconfigure for 2 and a blue. And then finally, we have Urza Lord High Artificer for 2 and 2 blue. It is a 1/4. When Urza Lord High Artificer enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Tap an untapped artifact you control to add blue. And for 5, you can shuffle your library, then exile the top card. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. Okay, next up is going to be Instants. Starting with Behold the Multiverse. For 3 and a blue, you can scry 2, then draw 2 cards. It has Foretell, and its Foretell cost to cast it is 1 and a blue. We got Cackling Counterpart for 1 and 2 blue. Put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of target creature you control. Has Flashback for 5 and 2 blue. Circular Logic for 2 and a blue. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. It has Madness for 1 blue. Defy Gravity for 1 blue. Target creature gains flying until end of turn and has Flashback for 1 blue. Depart the Realm for 1 and a blue. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. It has Foretell, and its Foretell cost to be cast is blue. Faded Infatuation for 3 blue. Put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of target creature you control. If it's your turn, scry 2. Frantic Search for 2 and a blue. Draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. Untap up to 3 lands. Just the Wind for 1 and a blue. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Has Madness for 1 blue. Mental Note for 1 blue. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard and then draw a card. Mission Briefing for 2 blue. Surveil 2, then choose an instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. If that card would be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. Mystic Reflection for 1 and a blue. Choose target non-legendary creature. The next time one or more creatures of the Planeswalker or Planeswalkers enter the battlefield this turn, they enter as copies of the chosen creature. It has Foretell, and the Foretell cost is 1 blue. Obsessive Search for 1 blue. Draw a card. It has Madness for 1 blue. Una's Grace for 2 and a blue. Target player draws a card, and it has Retrace. Release to the Wind for 2 and a blue. Exile target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it without paying its mana cost. Saw It Coming for 1 and 2 blue. Counter target spell. It has a Foretell cost, and that cost is 1 and a blue. Thought Scour for 1 blue. Target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard and then draw a card. Okay, next up is sorceries. Starting with Artful Dodge. For 1 blue, target creature is unblockable this turn. Flashback for 1 blue. Deep Analysis for 3 and a blue. Target player draws 2 cards. Flashback for 1 and blue and pay 3 life. Hands of Binding for 1 and a blue. Tap target creature and opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, and it has Cipher. Inspiring Refrain for 4 and 2 blue. Draw 2 cards. Exile Inspiring Refrain with 3 time counters on it. You can suspend it with 3 time counters on it for 2 and a blue. Mirage Mockery for 2 and a blue. Choose one. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact creature you control, or create a token that's a copy of target non-artifact creature you control, and is entwined for 2 and a blue. Quantum Misalignment for 4 and a blue. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it isn't legendary, and it has Rebound. Quasi-Duplicate for 1 and 2 blue. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and it has Jumpstart. Quiet Speculation for 1 and a blue. Search your library. Search target player's library for up to 3 cards with flashback and put them into that player's graveyard. Then the player shuffles his or her library. Raven Form for 2 and a blue. Exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying, and it has Foretell for 1 blue. Rise and Shine for 1 and a blue. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature. Put 4+1/+1 counters on each artifact that becomes a creature this way. It has Overload for 4 and 2 blue. Rite of Replication for 2 and 2 blue has Kicker for 5. Put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of target creature. If Rite of Replication was kicked, put 5 of those tokens onto the battlefield instead. Stolen Identity for 4 and 2 blue. Put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of target artifact or creature, and then it has Cipher. And then I believe lastly, yes, we have Temporal Mastery for 5 and 2 blue. Take an extra turn after this one. Exile Temporal Mastery. It has Miracle for 1 and a blue. Next we have our artifacts. Starting with Arcane Signet. You pay 2. Sorry, it costs 2. You can tap this to add 1 mana of any color of your commander's color identity. We have Crystal Shard for 3. You can pay 3 and tap this, or pay a blue and tap this to return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. We have Felwar Stone for 2. You can tap this to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. 500-Year Diary for 3 and a blue. 500-Year Diary enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add blue mana for each clue you control, and you can tap 2 and sacrifice 500-Year Diary to draw a card. Gilded Lotus for 5. You can tap it to add 3 mana of any one color. Inspiring Statuary for 3. Non-artifact spells you cast have Improvise. Kruk Clan Ironworks for 4. Sacrifice an artifact. Add 2 to your mana pool. Mindstone costs 2. You can tap it to add colorless, or you can tap 1 it and sacrifice it to draw a card. Moon Snare Prototype costs 1 blue. You can tap it and an untapped artifact you control to add 1 colorless, or you can channel it for 4 and a blue and discard it. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it onto the top or bottom of their library. Got Soul Ring for 1. You can tap it to add 2 colorless. Got Soul Talisman. This doesn't cost anything, but it has a suspend for 3, and you pay 1 to suspend it. You can tap this to add 2 colorless. Got Sonic Screwdriver. Costs 3. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. You can tap 1 and it to untap another target artifact. You can tap 2 and it to scry 1, or you can tap 3 and it to have target creature become unblockable this turn. Thought Vessel costs 2. You have no maximum hand size, and you can tap it for colorless. We have Throne of Eldraine for 5. As Throne of Eldraine enters the battlefield, choose a color. You can tap this to add 4 mana of the chosen color. Spend this mana only to cast monocolored spells of that color. Or you can tap 3 and tap this to draw 2 cards. Spend only mana of the chosen color to activate that ability. And then finally we have Wondrous Crucible. For 7, permanents you control have Ward 2, and at the beginning of your end step, mill 2 cards. Then exile a non-land card at random from your graveyard, copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Next up is Enchantments. Let's start with the Extraordinary Journey. This is 2x and 2 blue. When Extraordinary Journey enters the battlefield, exile up to X target creatures. For each of those cards, its owner may play it for as long as it remains in exile. Whenever one or more non-token creatures enter the battlefield, if one or more of them entered the battlefield from exile, or was cast from exile, you may draw a card. This triggers only once each turn. Next up we have Future Sight for 2 and 3 blue. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play the top card of your library. Mechanized Production for 2 and 2 blue. Enchant artifact you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then, if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. Then we have Mind's Dilation for 5 and 2 blue. When an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, that player exiles the top card of his or her library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. All right, next up we've got non-basic lands. Yeah, there we go. Starting with Buried Ruin. You can tap this for colorless, or you can tap 2 and sacrifice it to return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. We have Darksteel Citadel. It is indestructible and taps for colorless. Emergence Zone taps for colorless, and you can pay 1 and it to sacrifice it, and have and you may cast spells this turn as though they had flash. We have Gallifrey Council's Chamber. When Gallifrey Council's Chamber enters the battlefield, surveil 1. You may tap it to add colorless. You can also tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast Time Lord or Alien spells, or activate an ability of a Time Lord or Alien. Lonely Sandbar, which enters the battlefield tapped, taps for blue, and cycles for blue. Mystic Sanctuary, which counts as an island, enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other islands, and when it enters the battlefield untapped, you may put target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. We have Reliquary Tower, which says you have no maximum hand size, and you can tap it for colorless. And then we have Seat of Synod, which is an artifact land that taps for blue. We have Treasure Vault, which you can tap for colorless, or you can pay 2x, tap it, and sacrifice it to create X treasure tokens. And then we have War Room, which taps for colorless, and you can pay 3 and tap it to pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity to draw a card. And then finally, we're going to look at basic lands. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 24 islands. Okay, so that is the Osgood Operation Double deck tech. The idea here is to get Osgood onto the table and then copy her or Osgood Operation Double token a lot. Create a ton of clue tokens, and then use things like Rise and Shine or Cyberdrive Awakener to swing with those and win. But there's a ton of other things that you can do in this deck. You can use, I think it's called Mechanized Production, to just win on your next upkeep with a clue victory. You can also copy Urza a couple of times with things that don't that make non-legendary token versions of him to create a bunch of the artifact golems. There's a lot of things you can do with this deck. It's very versatile. But mostly it's just getting Osgood, copying Osgood a lot, getting a lot of clue tokens, and then trying to win in that fashion. There are no Thassa's Oracle, Jace, Wielder of Mystery, Labman, victories in here, even though you probably could do that with this deck. I also avoided a lot of different clone creatures that could be put in here because a lot of this has to do with Osgood's ability, Paradox ability, whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, investigate. So a lot of the cards are things like the Cackling Counterpart, which you can cast flashback from the graveyard, so that will trigger, as well as other types of things like that, although there are still copy creatures in here. It's still kind of a work in progress too. There's always new things that I'm seeing that I'm like, oh, that would be really cool in here. But it was a lot of fun to build this deck. I have tested it in a vacuum a couple of times, and it has worked out really well. And I can't wait to get this to the table, so I'm excited to show this guy off. Anyway, that is Osgood Operation Double. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. Keep it positive. I will remove negative comments. And I think that's it. So until next time, guys. Peace.